So I have three Apollos here. I have the Apollo X16, the Apollo X8, and the Apollo X4, which is a desktop Apollo. I'm actually able to control the monitor racked Apollo, which is my 8, with the X4 that's on the desktop. So the biggest challenge was, how do I make all of this work, and how can I be fast doing it? Let's talk about it. What's up? Welcome back to my channel, and welcome back to my home studio where I do all of my music production, recording, mixing, mastering, film, audio, music, post work. I am your host, Archie Beats, and today we have my epic Universal Audio vocal chain setup Cascade Apollo on how I make all of this stuff work, because my home studio setup is more than just for music production and recording. It's also for film. So how could I set all of this up? How can I set up all of my preamps? How can I cascade all of my Apollos? That's what we're diving into today. So I'm going to show you guys how everything is connected, how I set it up, how I got everything to talk and work properly with my computer here, my new MacBook Pro M2. Because when you step in your home studio, you want your workflow to be smooth. And a major shout out to Universal Audio for getting these Apollos out to me. Those guys over there are great. They're fantastic. So yeah, shout out to Universal Audio. And don't forget, Universal Audio have select plugins that run natively now. They have 3 different collections of plugins that cater to different types of creators, and the plugins run natively. So you definitely want to check them out. First thing first, what's happening here with this setup? The goal is to get, as I mentioned, everything to work together in my home studio, and the Apollos are the centerpiece of that, because the audio interface is the device that really determines and dictates a lot in your studio. It dictates your connectivity and how you get all of your information that you're recording or capturing to your computer, and there's some conversions that's taking place there as well. And the X16 is the flagship Apollo with the top of the line converters. And setting up this multiple unit of cascading the Apollos was actually really easy. The most challenging part was the inputs and the outputs, and figuring out how did I want everything to work and how did I want everything organized. Of course, you have to blueprint this stuff out before you even get the things. You have to go out and buy cables. You just have to make sure that you are coming into this situation prepared to be under the desk for a while. And I'm doing this without a patch bay. I love patch bays, but right now my desk is very limited for that. So we figured it out. I have 3 Apollos here. I have the Apollo X16, the Apollo X8, and the Apollo X4, which is a desktop Apollo. I'm actually able to control the monitor racked Apollo, which is my 8, with the X4 that's on the desktop. Let's talk about how I arranged it and connected it, and then we're going to talk about how did I make everything work in the console software. And the Universal Audio SD1 here is plugged into my Apollo X4, and my Apollo X4 is, we're working backwards here, is going into my Apollo 8, X8, and then into my Apollo 16, which is connected to my computer. I'm able to use this microphone without going under the desk, which makes everything so convenient. So although this unit is sitting on the desk here, it serves as a microphone patch, to be honest, if that makes sense, because I can pretty much connect any microphone I have, my Universal Audio Sphere DLX and my Sphere LX, into the back of here, the rear and the front and the rear, or into my 2-channel Midi 5211 here. If you look at this diagram here, this is pretty much my entire setup here, but there's a lot of other different things that are happening. But let's talk about the basic, which is, this is pretty much the basic setup, the default setup I went with. I'm basically connecting to my MacBook Pro, my M2 MacBook Pro. Then we are going into my Apollo X8, which is basically the unit with the multiple TRS connections on it here. And this is where my monitoring is running. As a matter of fact, you are basically listening to the direct out of the monitor left and right, the main outs, going into my Apollo X4. And this is pretty much the setup. And instead of this being a twin here, this is where my Apollo X4 comes into play at, which is the, I basically use the knobs to control it. And the interesting part about it, I'm also using to talk through my Universal Audio SD1 here, is going into the input of my Apollo X4. Now, I can plug into any input on this unit here and it still will work, and you will still be able to hear it. Which, let's talk about my preamps. So this is the basic setup right here. This is how I have it cascaded. Now, as far as my outboard gear with my Midi 5211, my Universal Audio 6176, I have pretty much everything wired at the top unit because I'm not using it as a monitor unit. The inputs work. I'm actually plugging everything into the appropriate setup with the line out and the line in. And I have this plugged into my outboard gear. Whenever I want to actually use this is where the tricky part comes in at. So with that being said, we're going to jump into console and show you guys how I'm able to toggle between my inputs and my outputs and my sends and my inserts by actually rearranging the Apollos in the actual monitoring section. So let's go ahead and take a look here. So let's take a look at the screen here. As you all can see, as I mentioned, I'm talking through my Universal Audio SD1 here. And with that SD1, you can see that I have everything muted, of course, but I'm not talking on the main Apollo units connected to the computer. And this is because we're able to cascade and expand with multiple Apollo units. If you can see up top here, it says Apollo X and Apollo 16. Why isn't Apollo 16 first? We're going to get to that as well. And Apollo X4. This is not going to be defaultly. When you go into the console software, you're going to actually have to right click or control click on your MacBook Pro or right click on your iMac or Mac Pro computer and show device name so you can basically see what's going on here. Now, to make all of this work is that when I go into my settings here, you can see that there is a speaker beside my Apollo X8. Now, this is because with this speaker icon, this is my monitor unit. In order for me to send things out, the Apollo has to be the monitor unit, which is why you saw in the diagram, majority of the monitor unit and was named monitor unit, all the speakers and everything was connected to that. Now, this doesn't work necessarily for the inputs. We don't necessarily have to do this for the input. It's a really cool way of routing things, but this is where the noggin comes in at when it comes to routing and sends and returns. This works really easy for me because the only thing I have to do if I want to make, because all of my DB25s are connected to my Apollo 16s as far as my outputs to send to my outboard gear, like with my Need 5211, my Universal Audio 6176, my Tegla Cream, all of my outboard gear. The only thing I have to do is this. Hear the click. But I want to show you guys how the computer screen blanked out, and this audio is pre-recorded and overlaid so I can explain this to you. What's happening is it's taking the output and placing the Apollo 16 as the main distributor of the output so I can utilize my outboard gear for sends and return. This is the way and the nature that I want things to be routed, and it works out just fine. This is pretty much how I have everything working and talking together. All of my sound modules, my outboard gear is all working seamlessly. And like I said, the only thing I have to do is pretty much slide up whichever Apollo unit I want to be the monitor unit. If I actually want to send something out or have my studio monitors work, you have to designate that Apollo unit for the monitor Apollo unit. If you have any questions about my Universal Audio Apollo Cascade setup, multi-unit setup, please comment them below. I will be happy to answer your questions. I've been using the Universal Audio Apollos for a very long time, and they are the centerpiece of my recording studio. So if you have any questions, be sure to comment them below. Don't forget to be great and create. And this is your Barchi Beats, and I'm signing off.